say to all of you is, most importantly, thank you for being here. And for those of you who have participated in helping educate us in terms of what is happening in the world of AI, we thank you for your participation. Now, I have two people who have joined me as introduced earlier by Dan. We're going to talk a bit about how we've actually gone about implementing AI. And my distinguished panel member first, Matthew Tate, who is the product owner of AI. Those of you who are readers, you may have seen in the Wall Street Journal article about Allstate, and Matt has been an instrumental part of that implementation. Next to him is Jon Eisenstein, and Jon has been both a user from an IP Center standpoint and now an avid Amelia user, but in addition to that, he's also a global advisor, consultant, and AI guru, as we have seen him work with many accounts. And then last, we are joined by Dawn. Hi, Dawn, how are you? And Dawn Damico represents as the VP of Digital Workforce and Platform Solutions. She comes from Fannie Mae. So it'll be great to see how the government or quasi-government agency is adopting the new AI environment as well. So in a compressed time frame, we agreed we'd do a couple of questions. So in the business discipline where you deploy digital labor, could you highlight some surprising or perhaps predictable outcomes that you've encountered?
So with our implementation of Amelia at Allstate, we deployed Amelia within one of our customer contact centers. We did it very intentionally because we recognized it would be a very highly transactional environment that we could control adoption and usage of the platform. So you could imagine that we're introducing this artificial intelligence platform to users who are call takers, and their first reaction is, she's going to take my job. So we spent a lot of time with change management, and they very quickly realized that Amelia was a partner and an asset that they could adopt because she helped every day make their job easier. I'll say that those revelations probably aren't shocking to most of you in here. We've heard that from almost every speaker who has experience with this technology. What I would say is something that is very evident to us now is that the idea of value to your end users isn't just things that you find on a spreadsheet that are your top 25 most common calls or questions that you have to answer. Value to your end users is something that only they find valuable. So we spend a lot of time working very closely with our end users to constantly gather their feedback and adjust to create a platform that they find is valuable, which makes adoption and usage a very easy process for us. Opposed to forcing them and pushing them to use it, they want to use it and they want to adopt it. So I would stress that even though a lot of these things that you're hearing today are probably very things that are very relatable to you, I would look at what do your end users find as valuable and pursue those types of things.
Thanks, Matt. I think the word augmented intelligence comes to mind because we really are combining the digital labor with the human labor, and that workforce is quite powerful, and you've seen that occur. Jon, to you.
Sure. I would say a couple of things that were maybe surprising and not was the pace of adoption. The part that was I would say surprising was that as we went through the process of doing the implementation, the workforce breaks up into about 3 basic quadrants, and it's about a third, right? So the first third of the workforce is not only not going to embrace it, they're not going to get it, and they're actually going to actively fight it. And these are the ones that you can start to detect who they are by when they're making statements like it'll never do X, or this isn't possible, or it's always going to involve Y, or we can't do this because this other team says it can't be done. Whatever it is, right? Those are the people you can start to identify. What I would say about that group of people is the faster that you can find a way to get rid of them, the better off you are. I know that that may sound controversial, especially to some of our European colleagues, but really what they are is they end up being an organizational bottleneck, a boat anchor, cancer, whatever you want to call them. They don't end up doing good things for the overall progress of the program. The second third are going to be the people that will ultimately get it. They may not necessarily be the staunch advocates of it, but they're probably going to be able to get to a B+. So with lots of training and coddling and maybe even a little bit of coercion, they'll eventually get there, right? And then you have the next third, which are really your advocates, the people that really see it as a way to not have to do the mundane, the repetitive, that also see it as a way to reduce things like errors and duplication. And so the quicker that you can empower those folks to set an example for the second tier, the better off you'll be. And I would say that one of the things that we learned in our implementation, that if I could do it again, I would do differently, would have been to accelerate the expunging of that first tier of employees. These are people that are that need to understand that if they're not going to do it, their replacements will figure out how.
You're not expecting any fruitcakes for Christmas from that first third?
Yeah. Not without some form of IED in it.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a beloved group back there having heard this. So let's switch over to the government that seems to hang on to people and now retraining, as we've seen, the government being very aggressive in the adoption of AI throughout the. I think that there's been some presidential decrees about that. Following then the cloud implementation, now we see AI rearing its head. What are you seeing in your environment?
Yeah, well, I will say that we've been trying to automate business processes for years, and we've been doing that with traditional workflow automation, with reconciliation tools, and what surprises me is how many manual business processes we still have. And so I'm really hopeful that some of these new technologies, RPA and optical scanning, we've started using with some success. And we just started with IPSoft, so I'm hopeful that some of these new technologies will help us address that backlog. And what I see is that the manual processes exist because if you look at them individually on their own, there's really not a whole lot of benefit in automating that. But when you add up all of them together in aggregate, you get an enormous opportunity. And so that's where I'm really hopeful that we can start to clear that backlog.
If I could just add one comment to this, Dawn. How did you go about building the business case to make that kind of decision to make some of these changes like you're now going through?
Yeah, it's been really incremental. I think that we had a vision and ideas, and we just had to really get some runs up on the board to be able to show folks that there's a really big opportunity there. And so that's where we are right now. I think IPSoft and AI can even help us further reduce the backlog.
Great. The second question we really had was to try to, as we've done today, and having a number of speakers talk about the impact of AI on human labor. And John, you've already spoken for that unwashed third that is obviously going to be challenged. But I think that we want to take seriously the impact of AI and these new digital labor technologies upon the human workforce. It's going to change the knowledge workers' jobs. It's going to change the skills that are required. It's going to change the educational requirements as you enter the workforce. So the second question I thought would be a good one for us to address was how must the skills of the operations and support personnel really need to change to best adapt to these new digital operating technologies and the expectations of increased efficiency? We're going to push harder, we're going to expect more, and the improved performance. Why else invest? If we're going to make these shifts, what can we get for that yield? So how are these people going to get skills training to play? And so John, since you kind of had a couple of those opinions, if you would start us.
Sure. When it comes to getting employees into the space, one of the things that worked out very well ultimately was reducing a whole bunch of the friction associated with getting automation in place, right? Any kind of automation. So you can start off with something simple like RPA, which I'm a fan of, but it has some pretty significant risks around architecture and compliance and a whole bunch of other things. That's a discussion for another time, maybe requiring far more liquid. But I think that when it comes to like how you get the employees to do it, have them just start to do it. And you can start with something like an RPA tool, and you can say, well, let's take a screen recording and let's see what you're doing, and let's let the bot do it. Then they start to get the basic concepts of what it's like to let robotic automation, whatever it is, simple stuff, start to take the reins of the most mundane activities. And when they start to get those kinds of concepts, they're almost immediately going to hit a wall. Well, I want it to do this, but it can't get into that system, or it can't execute this next more complicated step. How do I do that? And then you help them to solve that next step of problem. But rather than trying to architect the entire thing, beginning to end, step into it, prototype it, fail fast, keep trying, and then when they're hitting their heads against a wall on something, you're like, okay, well, here's a way that we can solve it with a level of orchestration. These things effectively become microservices. And the way that you apply the same kind of enterprise architectural skill set to enterprise architecture and applications, you have to start to do the same thing around automation. That's also the reason to have, as you're doing these things, it's great to have a bunch of chatbots running all over the place. Those things tend to do one or two things. They might do them in kind of a mediocre fashion at best, but then they hit a wall relatively quickly, right? Those things are okay to start with, but once you get past them, and you're going to outgrow them. Most organizations outgrow basic RPA tools and chatbots within their first couple of iterations. As soon as they get past those, people are going to start to realize, okay, well, I need greater extensibility. I need greater access into some of the core systems. And as they start to play with and question those things, they start to really dig their hands in. But the whole time while they're doing this, they're not executing the same task. They're actually playing with and orchestrating a bot to do it on their behalf. So it's kind of getting them to think in that mindset. It's Lincoln Logs. It's just experiment with the different components and give it a try.
So not only will you be getting no fruitcakes from that third of the employees, you just lost the whole RPA and chatbot industry, but that's okay. Mediocre is a good description.
Thank you for that.
More than happy to help, John. Dawn, how about the skill sets? What do you see about the people that are coming into the government, the newer employees? Are they getting the kind of training? What are those kind of skill sets you're looking for to really help your team?
Yeah, the mindset is key. And for us, it starts with our management system. So for employees, we're training them in lean techniques, agile, and we're using that to promote this culture and mindset of continuous improvement and end-to-end process management and leveraging visual management. So for the skill set, for us, for an operations person, deep subject matter expertise used to trump everything else, and it doesn't anymore. So now we want employees who have a breadth of experience and who have that mindset of continuous improvement and who can see end to end.
Do you find the younger people coming in out of the college world, we'll call them the early millennials and et cetera, are you finding that they're a little bit more adept than perhaps an old codger like myself? And that's okay. You can say anything you'd like. It's safe.
In different ways. Yeah. I think sort of the mobility and the mindset of seeing broad is definitely easier with that group. But it comes with its own challenges. So.
Old dogs can be taught new tricks. Trust me, old dogs can be taught new tricks. Matthew, how about looking at the employee base and these kinds of skills and what you're seeing?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I really have to echo what John and Dawn have both said. We're in the same space of trying to reskill employees who used to be those deep process experts. Now we're asking them to be technologists, and that might not even be their background. So trying to understand Agile and Scrum methodologies, just trying to understand the technology in general. We use words like utterances and intents pretty commonly, but not everybody understands what that means. And so really just trying to bring your workforce along with you. I think John and his one-third pie example is very true. You need to look for that one-third that is going to be the innovators and who want to be a part of that technology. You will identify those people very quickly. So it's just a matter of really just, as a leader in your organization, one, I think, as Dawn had mentioned, it has to start from the top down, but ultimately identifying that you will be reskilling employees who at first might not seem like they are the type of technologist, but they really will surprise you and they will rise to the challenge.
So we've seen the consultative community rapidly adopt AI and become consultative to a lot of these businesses that are trying to go through digital transformation. So I'm presuming for PwC in particular is the great growth opportunity. But what we see mostly is companies struggling to try to get people to understand this mission, to be able to adapt, to be able to move along. Does this put a lot of pressure on you and your companies to have to train to take on that mantle rather than being able to easily go into the marketplace and find these skills?
So it's funny because when I was meeting with Daryl Hamer from IPsoft yesterday, one of the things that he reminded me was when we were first on this journey 3 years ago, we wanted to spend a lot of time planning and thinking about where we were going to go with this technology. We knew it was something that we felt like was disruptive and that we should start doing, and he reminded us a lot, just start. You know, you can spend a lot of time thinking about all of the possible technologies that could possibly be better tomorrow, but if you don't start today, you're rapidly losing what you could learn. And the idea of reskilling those employees, if you never start, you never know what skills they're really going to need. So you're doing a disservice to your organization by waiting.
Well said, Matt. John, additional opinion?
Yeah, look, cognitive automation, we were just talking about this before the panel. Cognitive automation, the employment of AI-based bots that can execute, not just give back an answer about something, but actually can take an action for you. This is happening, and it's going to happen, and it's going to disrupt every industry. I mean, we were talking about a couple of industries, but you can come up with a dozen different ways that it's going to affect every industry. That's not a bad thing. It just frees us up to be able to do higher order tasks. So it's really more a matter of just getting started. Grab the reins and go. I mean, it's not it's kind of like prototyping something. You're going to get it wrong at the beginning. That's okay. Fail fast, learn from it, and move on. But the longer you wait, cogitating about it, the more time you leave somebody else to do the disruption for you.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the instructions we had this morning is fail fast. It's great learning coming from failing fast because there are no rule books, right? We haven't put out the documentation and the rules, do this, here's the run book, follow this pattern. It's known, you know, we've been doing this for 20 years. You're building the next 20 years.
And if you're waiting for that, by the time you read it, it's too late.
Yeah, that's true. Dawn, additional comment?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Get started and test and learn is our mantra.
Test and learn, I like it. Yeah, you said something earlier that I would just like to emphasize. We talk about just get started, fail fast, and those methods. I think I would dub that and call it immersion. I like the idea of immersing yourself. We had a professor at my school who taught French and other languages, and he immersed you into the language and believed that was the only way you could ever learn. Sticking your toe in the water or listening to a tape or doing the way we used to learn languages just never was very fulfilling. But if you were immersed in it, lived it, thought it, you know, and did those things, it's amazing how fast you could learn that language. And so I think your guidance here today is move and don't stick the toe in the water. Let's start immersing, getting our people involved. And I think what we all would comment on is that it's a movement, it's a technology that's here, and it's going to rapidly proliferate. And if you aren't getting yourselves accommodating it and immersing your people in it, others are going to pass you by. Would that be a summation for you?
Yes.
Oh, they all agreed. Boy, did this work out well. So I want to thank all of our panel for doing two things. First of all, giving us some great insight. Thank you for that. They deserve a round of applause. And the second thing that is just unbelievable, amazing, is we're giving 23 seconds back to the program. Here we go.
Bless your heart.
All right. Thank you all.